All right, welcome Maddie to another popular episode of Quarantine with Ashmun. I believe this is episode 5 now, so it's really starting to take off, and I'm imagining that YouTube's going to be getting a hold of me pretty soon to start doing like advertising and things like that, because I'm getting like 35 views, I think, at this point.
Average or total?
In one video.
Oh, congratulations.
Patterson's has like 125 views.
It's because it's Dr. Patterson. So.
Yeah, so I'm big time. So let's start with, I obviously know who you are, but can you, for the millions of viewers at home, could you tell us who you are, what you do, that kind of stuff?
Yes, my name is Madeline Krisko, or Maddie, and I am a 9th grade English teacher at Ceres High School. It is my, 7th year in Ceres Unified. I just came back to the classroom after 3 years as an instructional coach, so what a great first year to come back. And I also am a teacher consultant for the Great Valley Writing Project. And I think my official title is Communications Coordinator, which is fancy for I send a lot of emails to people.
And you do a great job at that.
Thank
too.
you. I make them very colorful. That's why I got hired for that position. My use of font.
So you're at Ceres High School, and all 7 years, did you do 9th grade English?
No, I've taught 9th grade, 10th grade, ERWC 12th grade, creative writing, and KC test prep way back when they had the KC test. So I think I've taught every grade except for 11th. And before Ceres, I was in Palo Alto teaching 8th grade and study skills in creative writing at Jordan Middle School, which I think is called Green Middle School now, but I taught there for 3 years. So it is my 10th year teaching, which I don't know how that's even possible, but here I am.
So you gave me all kinds of things I want to ask you about. So for everyone else that may not know, ERWC stands for?
Is this a quiz, or are you going to tell me?
It's a quiz.
I think it's expository reading and writing curriculum. I always forget what the C course. I'm not sure. It's all nonfiction. So
yeah, I did that. I think it was in your group for this Summer Institute for Great Valley, where I was leaving to go do some ERWC work, and then someone asked me what it was, and I got the C wrong, I think is what I...
Yeah, I know it's expository reading and writing, but I can never remember if it's course, curriculum, content, cool kids. Really sure.
And then you said Casey. I always say Cassie, but Casey. Oh. But yeah, you're probably right because you're in it. But I honestly don't know what Casey is.
It's the California, it was the California high school exit exam, which actually my senior year of high school, we were the first class to take it. So it used to be if you didn't pass it, you didn't get to graduate. And then I want to say maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, they removed it as a graduation requirement. So okay. I don't even know if, I imagine they don't give it anymore if you don't have to pass it. So yeah, thankfully that's no longer a grad requirement.
The other question I had that when you were saying all these different cool things that you're doing is this idea from moving from Palo Alto to teaching in Palo Alto to teaching in Ceres. Are there, I imagine there's significant differences, and could you point to any of those?
Yeah, so Palo Alto was the greatest culture shock of my life. I grew up in Sacramento and went to college in Chico, which is kind of similar to Ceres in a way. And then going to Palo Alto, I was like dropped into this world that I had no idea any of it. My students, I had a magazine on my desk of Mark Zuckerberg. And this girl was like, "Oh, Mark, I was at his house last weekend for a bar mitzvah." And I was like, "Of course you, like, why wouldn't you be at Mark Zuckerberg's house?" Like, but they didn't see it as abnormal. So it was just like this whole different land of students. And they would, they had tutors, they had, day camps, they had all sorts of, parents who had multiple degrees. So it was kind of like they were going to be successful. I don't want to say no matter who they had as a teacher, but they were going to be successful. I have students who are doctors and surgeons and all this stuff from Palo Alto. And then coming back to Ceres, it was kind of like what I was more used to, and it felt more like coming home, where it feels like you're really making that difference. Where in Palo Alto, it was fun. I learned how to design curriculum. We didn't have any curriculum, so I got to make it all up and learn how to do like standards and all that stuff. So I developed myself as a teacher. But then when I actually had students who needed me versus students who I was kind of just a warm body in the room, sometimes it felt like, that's where I really felt like I grew as a teacher when I came to series. So no offense, Palo Alto, I prefer series. And I think series is a really good job of giving professional development to teachers. So I feel like I was able to kind of learn, get my footing as a teacher in Palo Alto, but then I feel like I become a much better teacher being in series than I don't think I would have grown as much in Palo
Alto. One of the things that stood out too in that, I know we'll get to other questions, but I know we're still on the first one, but this idea you said, and I don't need you to point out like series specifically, but being around the Valley and teaching and stuff. One of the things you said was in Palo Alto, you guys didn't have curriculum, you were able to design curriculum. And my assumption and kind of what I've heard is that typically in the Valley and probably in most places, you're handed curriculum and like pacing guidelines and things like that where you're supposed to be. What's been has it been, what I heard basically was Palo Alto, wealthier, you get to design your own curriculum. The Valley, and this isn't what you said, but the Valley, not as wealthy, more poverty, and then you have teachers who are handed curriculum rather than having the autonomy and the freedom to design their own curriculum. Does that align? Is that right, or is that not right?
I say yes and no. Literally, when I started teaching Palo Alto, the principal said, we have no curriculum, we have no textbooks, nobody's gonna come check on you unless a parent complains, here's your keys, good luck, and like walked away. So I was like fresh out of college, I'm like, I don't even know how to turn a standard into a lesson. When I came to series though, it was right between kind of the new standards and like the new curriculum. So when I got to series, we didn't have curriculum either. They had Holt, which you could use as a resource, but we were realizing Holt wasn't really the best, but we hadn't really found anything new yet. So this is actually my first year ever having curriculum. Here's your curriculum. So that was a big, hard adjustment for me, being able to have kind of ultimate freedom for 9 years and then kind of pigeonholed into curriculum. So we use Springboard. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. You can bleep me on YouTube if I can't. Which has its pros and its cons. But that was a really hard adjustment coming back to the classroom from an instructional coach, where you kind of learn all these great resources and like all this stuff, and then the curriculum may or may not have the things that you really want to do in it. So learning to adjust and use the curriculum while at the same time doing all those things that I know make for good instruction was the hardest thing.
So can you give me a sense of what that looks like to have, like, you say, I'm familiar with Springboard in the sense I've heard it before, but like when someone says, oh, they hand you the curriculum or the curriculum's already like given to you, what does that look like? Is that like literally like every single thing's there, or is there some freedom there? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, you're gonna get me in trouble here. I'm gonna try to show you. No,
generally speaking.
The curriculum we have, and I was on the instructional coach side when it first rolled out, so I kind of saw the ed services part of it a lot, and then now I'm in the classroom using it. But it's integrity to the curriculum, not fidelity to the curriculum, is kind of our big difference, where the curriculum is the scaffold, not the entire like building. So you can add things if students are struggling, but they still heavily emphasize that we're teaching standards, not curriculum. So the curriculum is a vehicle to get to the standards, but really what we want to make sure kids are learning what they need to be learning, and the curriculum is just kind of there to help you get to where the students need to be. But the biggest shift, I think, for me instructionally was kind of like, how can I say this? We were more almost thematic before, where it was like, we want students to learn complex characters. So we'd get all these great stories about characters, talk about characters, watch videos about characters, and everything was about the character element. And by the end, they had done it, like practiced it so much that they saw success, they felt successful, and then we can move on to something else. Springboard and a lot of the new curriculums good, bad, or indifferent is more cyclical. So they're like, we're going to touch on characters here, and then we're going to come back to it in a month, and then we're going to come back to it in a month. And by the end, students will know characters. But there's too much time in between. And so you're spending a lot of time kind of spinning your wheels going backwards, where students forget, and then you're reminding them, rather than practicing with the same concept until students really get it, and then you can move to something else and building that way. So that's kind of been a big shift for me, of knowing that students aren't going to be perfect at the standard before you move on to something else, because I always want to make sure that they see the success. So kind of building in some things where they see success. I mean, we saw it in with Zaretta Hammond. You have to have, and I always think I'm saying this wrong, you have to have competence before confidence. So getting students to where they can be good at something, and then they're like, oh, I actually understand this, before you move on. Whereas a lot of the cyclical curriculum, they're not really able to see that, because it disappears. And by the time it comes back around again, they never felt confident with it, so it didn't sink in. That was a really long answer to answer that question.
No, that's perfect. And that, you reminded me though, not to go off topic, but the competence before confidence, did one of us say that wrong in a conference at one point? Is that why we remember that? Or
no, because we were getting ready to present in like 90 minutes. We were going to present on Zaretta Hammond's book, and then she ended up being the keynote speaker. We were like, oh no. So she said that, and she said it like 3 times, and every time she said it, I was like, is she saying that wrong? Like, shouldn't it be confidence? But then when she said no, because you can't rah someone into learning. Like, you can't just be like, you can do it, come on, you can do it. Because if they can't do it, you telling them you can do it is not going to help them do it.
Right. That reminds me of so this morning, I'm going to look it up real quick, but there is a quote that came through, and it reminded me of kind of what's going on right now with the online expectations we're asking of students. And I've gotten a lot of different teachers saying, like, you have to keep your expectations high, and they'll rise to the expectations. And I agree with that in a certain sense. And I think that's kind of the norm. The default is saying stuff like that, and usually teachers and people in general just kind of nod their head. But there's a quote I got in this morning that said, this is in my email: when we are challenged, we do not rise to our expectations, we fall to our level of practice. And it's 2:00, and I read it like at 8:00 this morning, so I'm still like wrapping my mind around that. But I like the idea of thinking about that we fall to our practice. So basically, like, our habits is what I'm getting out of it. Like, what we do on a daily basis is what we fall back on, not this idea of always rising to the expectation. So making sure, to me, that means for education, making sure that our students have these daily practices and habits of mind, that when those expectations are heightened, then they're able to fall back on those really strong positive practices to get to those points. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it reminded me of that quote.
Yeah, something else that I heard this morning, I mean, I don't have an exact quote, but the idea that we are not doing we are not teaching, we're not doing our jobs from home right now. Mm-hmm. We are surviving a pandemic while also trying to do our job. Right. And I think a lot of people are forgetting that we can't just go from the class. I mean, I'm in a fake classroom right now. We can't go from our real classroom to our home and expect everything to be the same. And I think when it was, we'll be back in a month, it was a lot easier to kind of say, well, we'll keep expectations high. We're going to, we have to come back. We're going to finish the year, so we can't let a lot of stuff slide. But we're not coming back for the rest of the year. And we really have to understand that this is more than 2 weeks away from school. And that's part of what I appreciated about the meeting we just had with my department is it's okay to understand that right now, sometimes you have to focus on the well-being of your students more than the content. And I've really started to shift my mindset on that, where it was like, at first it was like, they need to get the curriculum done because we have to come back, we have to finish things out, we can't just miss 3 weeks. And now I'm like, hey, if you guys want to hop on Zoom, we can just hang out. Like, you don't have to ask questions, you just want to check in, you want to say hi, show me your pets. Like, they're going through so much more than what they're going to be missing from not reading that article or not writing that paragraph. Like, they stand to lose so much more than 3 weeks of curriculum at this point. Like, we have to really be taking care of each other as people and not as grades. And that's my biggest takeaway right now is they're not going to get everything, and that's okay. But if we are so focused on making sure that their grades are aligned and they're turning stuff in, we're going to miss a huge opportunity to support each other as individuals.
Absolutely. That makes me so happy to hear that you're having those discussions and that's being talked about at your school site. One of the things when this all started, I was still at Stanislaus, and I think it was the day of or that afternoon they decided for everything to go online. And I was talking to a colleague of mine, and they said, not a colleague, yeah, a colleague. She's also my chair in my, she's a professor of mine and a chair of my dissertation. So she said the sooner faculty realize that all the goals that you had for your students this semester aren't going to happen the way that you thought they were going to happen, and accept that and start just taking care of each other, the better off everybody's going to be and this semester is going to be. And it was exactly what I needed to hear at that time, because you have these feelings of, like, my gut always defaults to taking care of people, and that's the most important thing, and rather than, you know, the learning outcomes or whatever. But I also was feeling like, well, if I do that and I simplify things, then am I not taking care of like the educational part of it, not living up to it? And so then to start hearing, and Stephanie Patterson was in the same light, we need to take care of each other before anything else. And so it's nice to hear that those conversations are taking place at other spots too.
Yeah, and I did appreciate our principal because this whole time we've been extending grace to our students, and you know, our students have to babysit siblings, and our students have jobs of their own. Some of them are essential work, you know, like they're high school students, but a lot of them have very heavy lives that they're trying to deal with. And, you know, online, some teachers are not from California, but other states are like, I make sure that they're on Zoom at 8:30 in the morning, and I tell them you can't eat and you have to be dressed and you can't be in your pajamas. And I'm like, I'm just happy if they have, like, if they're safe for a day, you know, like I would love for them to do the work. And there are students who, you know, I put the final project expectations online and that's not due for 2 months. And some students are already working on it because they're in a different spot. But some of my students, I just need to send them a daily remind check in, hey, are you safe? Are you okay? They're not coming to school. So their needs are very different. And school's a safe spot for so many of our kids, and they're losing that. And making sure we can give them a safe spot outside of school is way more important right now than making sure we're giving them curriculum outside of school.
I'll add to that a little bit too, which I agree with everything.
And then I realized I didn't even finish the thought where I was going with that. But so we were giving students a lot of grace, and I felt like what was missing was like we weren't being given grace as teachers. And like we were still trying to do everything we originally were supposed to do, which is what I said at the beginning. We're not doing the same job. We can't be held to the same expectations. So at the meeting I just got out of with our department, the principal was like, you need to take care of yourself right now too. Like we're giving so much care to everyone else. And that's what I needed, like that permission to just be like, it's okay. Like you're not going to get through everything. So you need to give yourself the same grace that we're giving the students, in knowing that it's different. This whole thing is different.
Yeah, I think the idea of, we talk about care theory and the reciprocity of care, and the same thing of like this heavy emphasis on teachers providing that to students. I think there needs to also be a discussion. It's a different discussion from adults to K-12, but discussion about students providing that back to, and so I think that's important. But what I was going to say is, again, talking to a colleague, we're discussing this idea of how we are on the same page as far as like we need to take care of each other and humanity and that mindset with our students, but having such pushback from other colleagues about, no, we got to do this, this, and this, and then adding more assignments or adding more rigor or being concerned about rigor at this point. And one of the things that just jumped at me when I was having this discussion with her was, what scares me the most is this pandemic is the perfect opportunity and the perfect excuse to worry about humanity and use it as a time to really slow down and think about things. And so if we're getting pushback from other educators in this perfect kind of scenario to worry about humanity, what is their teaching like when we're not in this kind of situation? And so when you talk about like getting to know your students or connecting with them and having these deeper discussions, if we don't want to do it right now of all times, well, what are we like when this stuff isn't going on? And that was a really scary kind of realization for me to think about.
Yeah, and I think that from here, like our spring break starts on Friday, so we have one more day and then we kind of get a breather. But I think getting that permission today to kind of realize that we also deserve some grace and kind of breathing space. I'm really going to try to take spring break away from my computer, because for me, and I think this is one of the questions you had asked Dr. Patterson, if I remember, was about like self-care and how like taking care of yourself during this. I've not been doing a really good job of that. I wake up, between 4:30 and 5:30 with no alarm. I don't know why. My body literally can sleep however late it wants. And it's like, 5 a.m. sounds great. And then I walk for like 10 steps out here and I sit on my computer for, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours in a row, because there's always something to be done. And I can, a student turns something in, a student emails, and it's this constant and I need to just back away a little bit from it, because I'm stressing myself out. And the longevity of, oh my gosh, we're here for 2 more months doing this.
Right.
Like we're all going to burn out as teachers. And that's scary beyond anything else, is if we don't kind of realize how to take care of ourselves. Teachers are type A people. That's how we are. We want to, get everything done, do it quick, check things off. And we're going to burn out real fast if we don't. If I don't, or anybody who is very similar to me doesn't, that's something that I really need to work on.
No, and it's nice. It's not nice, but it's also nice hearing that similarities, because that's one of the things I noticed when this all started. I was thinking, oh, you're at home, you don't have to drive down to Turlock every day or whatever the case. But it feels like I'm on more, because that technology can reach you at any time. And if you're the type of educator who's like, oh yeah, I'll check my email, in 8 hours, then it's probably not that big of a deal. But if you're like, it sounds like the two of us, where as soon as it's push notified to me, as soon as I get the email, I'm checking it to see what's going on, or the Slack message, whatever. And then you're also thinking about, okay, they have a calendar, they know what they're supposed to be doing, but I could still maybe make a document for them to help walk them through this process or whatever. So you're always thinking about these other things, and then the technology is there for you to do it. So you're right, you have to make this effort to make sure that you're getting outside or doing projects or whatever the case, so that you can separate yourself from those things once in a while. I think that's a good advice too for future educators. Be really cognizant of where you are in your life, and are you being healthy right now? Because if you're burning out, then you're not going to be around anyways to help anybody.
Yeah, and I think that with it being distance, students are emailing more, and everything is turning in digital, and so it's so amplified, because you not only do you have that empty space where you once were teaching, but now you have all this other new issue. It's just been kind of a whirlwind. I think it kind of peaked when we realized that schools weren't reopening. And now we're kind of we had to have that moment of shifting our mindset and kind of shifting where we thought we were going. And now it's going to kind of slow down a little bit in our minds of okay, this is our new reality. We got to let some things go. We got to highlight what's important and kind of shifting that. So I think hopefully other people are kind of in that same boat of self-care and shifting and realizing that we have to take care of each other.
And going off that idea of amplifying too, one of the things I already knew this, but I'm realizing more, it's magnified now, but my favorite thing about teaching was going into the classroom and seeing my students, and that there's this filling of the well that takes place there. So it's almost like the self-care happens in the classroom for me too, where I get to interact with people and I get to have those conversations and help students, or they can help me, or whatever the case. And so you try to still have that on Slack or communication stuff, but it doesn't have that same kind of, whatever, that impromptu kind of thing that happens that when you're in person. And along those same lines, I asked if students wanted to do prompt of the day. I think it was 2 days ago. I think I had 5 or 6 students show up, just voluntary. And so we did kind of like the happy hour, but we did a prompt of the day. And I think it was 30 minutes or an hour that we were on there. And it was just very informal. We're not getting any points or anything. It's not an assignment. Just let's come in and hang out. and we all got to read and share what's going on in their lives. And you can tell, like, you can see the smiles, you can tell the energy. It felt good to do. And so I think there's that part of it too, that not being able to have those interactions in class and to actually teach in the classroom, the physical setting, kind of it keeps me empty in a spot. And so you have to make sure that you fill those areas as best you can.
Yeah, and I read something today that was like, why are teachers almost mourning right now? Like, what is it about? Like, what's happening? Like, okay, so you're at home, you do summer every year. Like, why is this so? And it said, first semester, you're trying to figure things out. You don't know each other. There's no relationship yet. So you're like building that relationship. You're setting the foundation. And then you go to break, and when you come back from winter, you kind of start ramping things up. And it's not really until you kind of hit that March, April, May month, where you get in that like zone of teaching. You know each other, you have those relationships built, you're able to dig deeper, and that's what we got removed from us. So it's like right as we started to feel like in our happy spot as teachers, and like things were fun, and you got to do the conversations, and students felt safe. And then it was like, okay, now that's like, you're going to start over again. And so that kind of like, I think when people who aren't teachers don't really understand what, like, it's not just we're not in a classroom. We're, it's not just that we're bored. It's like we're losing. And students are like, I hated school. I would give anything to go back to school right now. Like, I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. Like, not only like their friends, but like a student was like, I miss having somebody talk to me. Like, I miss somebody teaching me. Like, I can do it by myself, but I miss that. Mm-hmm. And so I really personally, and I'm hoping that I'm right about this, I think education and humanity is going to come out of this better.
Yeah.
I think that people are going to realize that we appreciate each other more. We appreciate the things that we had, and you can't appreciate it until it's gone. And I think that now everybody losing school, I really think we're going to come back, hopefully in August, but come back from this in a place where we care more about each other and a little less about curriculum, and that relationship building is going to start so much earlier, and people are going to almost crave it more. That I think we're going to come back from this a stronger community. That's my hope. I'm really hoping that happens.
Part of me wants to stop the podcast right there. That's a great way to end. Yeah, that was
perfect.
But
like this, like I keep thinking about this. I'm like, what are the good things that are coming out of this? Yeah. And that was my Talk It Up Tuesday prompt yesterday, was what life lessons have you learned from this that you need to remember to take with you? Mm-hmm. And because I think we get so, like, one student was like, I want to go hiking. I don't even like hiking, but like I just want to go do these things that I passed up before. And I think we're all feeling that, where it was like, oh, there's next weekend. Oh, there's next month. Like, I just want to watch TV tonight. I don't really want to go do that thing. And now we're like, I should have done that thing. Like, I should have gone to, book sales with my mom, and I should have done this. And now I can't do any of it. And we're realizing like we have 2 months to sit at home and watch TV. And we're like, please, I don't want to watch any more TV. Like, I want interaction. So hopefully coming out of this, when it comes to those times of, do I want to interact with people, or do I want to tune out the world? We might grab those interactions. I mean, not that, tuning out the world is always bad, but I think we just get so overwhelmed with everything that's going on that it's easier to just be like, I'm off of work, I'm done, but not being able to connect with people. But on the other hand, I've had so many video chats with friends who I haven't talked to in like a year, because we're all at home and we all have time, and we're like, let's get together on Zoom. So it has been nice in that aspect of getting those connections back once everything else is gone. And it's like, I'm not running errands, I'm not doing this, I'm not out, doing all this. So I connected with college friends and high school friends, and like we have the TC happy hours, and being able to connect with people who we wouldn't have the time to connect with before. I'm hoping that once we go back to the hustle and bustle, we pull that back with us.
Yeah, I hope the same thing. And my fear, and again, this is something I talked to my colleague about the other day, my fear is that when this all subsides, I think we have a tendency as human beings to forget things really quickly. And so it's going to have to be a very conscious effort on an individual level, and to hold each other accountable too, I think is important. But on an individual level, to say, this is something I'm going to keep in the forefront of my mind, and not to pat myself in the back, but one of the things I always talk to students about is that moving from have to get to language. And so this is a perfect example of, do I have to come to class today? And it literally is, no, you get to come to class today. And now we're seeing that really take shape through this. One of the next question I was going to ask you is about what your COVID-19 life is like, but I think we've talked about that. Kind of like what
my non-life.
Yeah.
That's all that it is coming and sitting at my computer and feeling guilty when it's not for some reason. I don't know why.
The point you made about getting to know students and then having this kind of ripped away from you, it was interesting to hear because it was the exact same thing that I was thinking from my semester with my students, but we're on such a shorter time frame. You know, you're talking about after winter, we come back in the spring and then you start. And so it was funny because like it was the exact same. I felt like all the names were memorized. I started seeing the personalities of different students. They started coming out of their shells more because they're more comfortable in the classroom. And then all of a sudden it's gone. And one of the sweetest memories I have this semester that took place was after this all happened. My 2009 class on Slack, when I was sending updates about, we're not meeting anymore, it's moving online, there was quite a few that posted the one class I did want to go to, or now I can't go to it. And so that was one of the things that I think if you're doing things right and your students are doing things right, those are the responses rather than, oh, good, we're going online, I don't have to go to that class anymore, or whatever the case. So that was a positive that came out of it for me, but it was also a sad thing because I want to be in that class too with you all, and now we can't do that. So, but you try to keep that alive as much as you can in the meantime.
And I think the way, sorry, I'm just going to piggyback. I think the way that it happened made it so much worse because it was mid-March, and it was like, I don't know how it was at Stan, but I think you guys shut down. You knew you were shutting down in a different way than us, but at the K-12 schools, it was, we'll be gone for a month, and then we'll come back and finish the school year. So nobody said bye, nobody closed anything out. And then there was also kids who were already absent because their parents didn't feel comfortable sending them to school, which is totally understandable. But you didn't even get that closure, which, right. I mean, again, people who aren't teachers don't understand because they're like, you get new classes every year, but it's like students spend more of their lives at school than they do a week at home.
Right.
And so for you to just be like, okay, I'll see you in a month, don't worry, everything's okay, we're going to come back. And then, when they announced it, kids were messaging me, are you serious? Is this a joke? And I'm like, no. And they're like, but we thought we were coming back. And it's like, we all thought we were coming back. And right. So had we known it was going to be indefinite or the school year, I think people would have felt a little better about it in a sense. You could have had that closure, said bye, kind of done some things. But it was like, we found out on Sunday we were closing on Wednesday. So it was just this rapid, but we'll be back. Don't worry, we'll be back. And then it was like, oh, actually, we're not. And now it's like, are we even coming back on the projected first day of school? I've heard some schools not in this area, but are like, maybe we just keep distance learning until we know for sure this is gone. How do we know when it's safe to come back? And so it was just a hard blow that I don't think people who aren't educators really truly understand why it's so difficult.
Right. And that point about closure is important too, because I think I've told you, but Dr. Patterson got me in the habit of having the potlucks at the end of the semester. And so that was always the closure, and we get to say goodbye and that kind of stuff. And it was a message online that we're not meeting. And so, I'm going to move us away from COVID for a little while, or for the rest of it, because I think it's enough. So one of the things that I always think about, okay, I'm going to be interviewing this person on this day or whatever. What's something thematically that I can talk to them about that stands out about them? And when I was thinking about you, one of the things that, and unfortunately this is being recorded, so that I'm going to compliment you, but don't get used to it.
I know I've had to watch myself a couple of times. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't say that on film. I shouldn't insult Brett where it's on record.
When I think about my students and how they're going to become educators in the future, you embody what I hope that my students develop into this. And what I mean by that is that you're a K-12 teacher, but you take on leadership. You are a professional. You're not, and again, this isn't to bash K-12 because there's, in higher ed that's going on too, but there's a tendency, I think, for K-12 teachers to get jaded or kind of get into the default or not do everything they can do. So when I see you though, like we presented at conferences together, you're involved in Great Valley, your voice is extremely strong in the sense that I know at Series Unified, they know who you are. I know in Great Valley, they know who you are. And I know when we go to conferences and we talk together or you talk on your own, that you're very powerful and people respect what you do. And it seems like it's a natural thing for you to just be passionate about education and passionate about your students. But my point in that long kind of compliment that
no, you can keep going. Go ahead.
is I want students to really to think about their careers and what kind of career do you want? Do you want a career where you're handed curriculum and you just do the bare minimum and are mediocre, or do you want a career that's you're a leader and you're involved and you're publishing, you're presenting at conferences, you're doing professional development, and not just doing it in the sense that you're the audience, but you're leading the professional development. That to me is two different types of educators. And so I guess my question is, why do you think you are that way, and how do you like sustain that kind of professional personality?
So there's a quote, and I don't know if it was a famous quote or somebody said it, I don't know, but it's there's a difference between teaching for 30 years and teaching 1 year 30 times. And that really hit me, because you could have a filing cabinet on day 1 of school. Here's what I do. Day 2 of school. Here's what I do. And you'll do fine. Like, your students will learn. But every year you have such a different group of students, and there's new things happening. And there's just, I've never been, and I can't see being the person who doesn't think, how can I make this better? How can I connect this more? How can I, how can I be better every year for my students? And I think that students deserve the best that we can give them. And I think that I left the classroom because I couldn't give them what they needed. And now I kind of, not to go into my personal life, but I've taken care of some things in my life. Now I can give them what they need. But I think that a lot of times we forget that students are people. And that sounds so silly, but like, we're in the business of people, not in the business of grades, not in the business of, points, or, even sometimes like SBAC data just drives me crazy, because it's not about the points or the grades. It's about the people at the core of it. And if you go into every year knowing that you have people that you're impacting, and whether it's PD or Great Valley or students, but the connection of people is what keeps me like invigorated and wanting to keep doing more. And, the ILIs and Saturday seminars and talking to people and getting new ideas and growing. It sounds kind of silly, but I can't picture not being that type of educator. Like, I wouldn't have gone into it if I was just going to kind of do the same thing and I was like, and this will tell you where I am in my COVID, but I was like, once I finally get the rest of this semester planned, I can start planning next year. And my fiance's son was like, what do you mean? Like, you're teaching the same thing? And I'm like, well, you can't just do the same thing every year. Like, you have to see what worked. You have to see what didn't work. Like, you have to change things. And then I'm like, but you don't even know, because your kids could be a whole different group of kids. So you kind of have to wait to see how they are. But yeah, I honestly, I can't see just going to work and coming home and, working in those hours and ignoring, like, it's just such an essential part of who I am that I can't see it being a job. And I think that's why I kind of came back as an instructional coach. It was great. I loved it, but it wasn't that bucket fill like you talk about, going in the classroom and having those conversations and meeting the kids and getting that bucket fill. Like, that wasn't my bucket fill.
I think that, so you remind me of Annie. I've obviously had my experiences with professors as a student, and Annie will talk about her classes sometimes, and really good professors and other ones. And it's something that I think I've actually said the exact same thing to her. It's like, I don't understand why you do this profession if you're not like interested in your students and in the business of human beings. Like, if that's not the first thing at the very forefront of what you're doing, like what's the point of doing this? Like, I get the curriculum and the knowledge building and stuff, but if that's the only thing that you're concerned about, I don't think you're probably being effective, number one. But also, like, what gets you up in the morning if you're worried about, oh, I can't wait to teach standard 7 today, about what, like, no, I'm excited about teaching student whoever, because they get excited about this, and this is going to help them and move forward and connecting with them while we're on this planet, kind of thing. So I think that's as you were saying that, I think that's a theme I've noticed too, and the people who I'm choosing to interview are successful people. And I think if you go through all these, what you'll notice is that same theme of being passionate about human beings and helping each other. And so I think that's a key thing. But I'm thinking also about students who are going into education who might have heard that and said, well, that's not my natural gut reaction to teaching. I'm not a person who cares deeply about human beings. I don't want to turn them off to teaching, but I would say it's a good time to reflect and think about, because I would bet that when they start teaching and they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years in, they're going to notice differences at their school site between the teachers who students really cling to and get a lot from and learn from, compared to the teachers who are upset and angry and bitter and jaded and just kind of going through the motions. And I really want them to think about that now over anything else, over lesson plans, over whatever else, theories. I want them to think about that, so because it's going to be beneficial for their students, and it's also going to be beneficial for them in their own career for the rest of their lives. Like, what kind of life do you want to lead? One that you're not excited about getting up in the morning and going to work, or one that you can't wait to get up and get after it?
And I mean, honestly, I think that like in the credential program, and when you're thinking about what subject you want to teach, and you're developing, those perfect units as a student teacher, that it's a little more natural to think like, oh, I'm going to teach them English. Like, I'm going to teach them how to write, and I'm going to teach these stories. And it's not until you're really in it that you kind of realize, like, no, I'm not that you're not excited about teaching your curriculum, but like when we found out we weren't coming back, it wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get to Romeo and Juliet, which I'm like, I'll take it or leave it. But it was like, my thoughts were, I'm never going to see Bella drawing hearts on her paper again. I'm never going to tell Jade to wash the Cheeto dust up. Like, I immediately went to the people. And like those moments that you're going to miss, rather than like the curriculum was secondary. Like, I could take or leave what they're going to miss about that. But it instantly was like, or, this student who we were just talking about problems that they were having at home, like, are they going to be able to cope? That's where my mind went instantly. Right. And I think that at the beginning, you are so like raw about your subject, and you like are so passionate about teaching, like, kids are going to love this book. And then you realize that the book isn't why you're there. The book is secondary. The book is what you're doing when you're not, like, like it's not the end all be all. So I think if people do feel like, well, I don't really know if I'm in it, like, I really like history, like, that's why I want to be a history teacher. I think you kind of learn along the way that, like, you're either in it for the students and the curriculum is almost secondary, or you're probably going to go find something else because you're really interested in that subject and not really the people, if that makes, I don't want to discourage anybody, but I think, you don't want to be that teacher that kind of has to stay in it because you've been in it for so long that you can't do anything else.
Right. You reminded me when you're talking about the Cheeto dust and the hearts. I don't know if you watched any of the videos, but on YouTube, Kelly Gallagher and Penny Kittle, I believe, are doing kind of like this, but not as cool. I didn't want to say that. And then, all the social media yelling at me. One of their prompts, I think it was Kelly Gallagher came up with, I really liked, was this idea of like, think about on a daily basis, who are those 3 to 6 people that you think about that you don't get to see anymore, and write in their perspective about what they're going through during this pandemic. So like, when you said that, I was like, that would be a perfect writing for you to do, like writing the student writing the hearts on their paper, or with the Cheeto dust. And think about like the concerns that you have. I'm not going to name them, but there's at least a handful of students I could name right now as far as concerns, you know, like how they're coping with this and what's going on. So I thought that was a cool prompt if you're wanting to get into that kind of emotional state while you're dealing with all of this stuff too. One thing I wanted to just touch on briefly, because we're kind of on that theme right now. I think when students, I know I was like this when I was kind of coming up, when we talk about publishing and going to conferences and presenting, I think it's a really nerve-wracking kind of idea. And I almost think that the majority of people who don't, of educators who don't go do those things, isn't because they can't do them. It's because they don't understand what they are, and they're nervous, or they feel they're inadequate and that kind of thing. So what I was hoping for a little bit is just kind of talk about what that process is like to go to a conference and present in front of other educators, and just to kind of maybe get a glimpse for students and future educators so that they know that it's not as terrifying as it might sound, I guess.
I mean, I think our official title was instructional coach and professional developer when I was a coach. And I know there's some teachers who can talk to students all day, put them in front of a group of teachers. They're like, I want nothing to do with this.
Right.
And I honestly, I've never I can talk to a room full of teachers. I can talk to a room full of students. I can talk to a room full of admin. Like, I don't care. Give me a topic and put me up. So talking at conferences was super exciting for me to be able to go. And I think our biggest fear was that it was the last session and it was raining, and we're like, is anybody even going to come? And I mean, the room was pretty full of people. So
to be fair, it was a smaller room.
It was standing room only. It was full. No, but I think that the biggest thing is realizing that we all have something to say. And I think that as educators, we're very humble, and we only operate within our four walls so much that becomes like just our little space, and we don't know what's happening in other rooms, and other rooms don't know what's happening in our room. And so we start to question ourselves a little bit, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing, like, should I be doing this different? Are other people doing it different? But realizing that we all have things that we could share and we could learn from each other. I think that's the hardest. I don't think it's getting up in front of people and talking that's the scariest part for people. I think it's believing that you have something worth being heard. That's hard for people. And I think once we realize that we all have something that we're doing that other people aren't doing, and that other people want to hear about, that we can't island ourselves as teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And making those connections with other educators, I think that really lowers it, where it becomes easier to speak your truth and speak your passion when you truly believe in it, and you believe that other people want to hear what you're doing.
It's interesting because that same thing happens when, again, 3009 Writing for Teachers, we talk about all the assignments. Basically, like a reader response is you're responding to the reading, but you're also using your own personal experience to connect to it. And then, like, in our creative nonfiction essay, or essay number 2, it's about like a story in their life. And whenever I do get pushback, it usually ends up being pushback that is, why do you care about like what I have to say, or my, like, I don't have anything interesting going on. And I think that happens too because the comfort level for so long has been read Romeo and Juliet, we'll say, read it, analyze what the author's doing, what they're saying, but there's no connection to like, what do you think about this? And then even to the point where I'll have students say, I can't write I in this paper. And it's like, yeah, you absolutely can. I want to hear what you have to say. And obviously there's different genres that call for different things, but there is, like, I see them in college where there's this understanding that I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, because it's been so like pushed on them not to do these things, like these rules. And a lot of times when you open that up and kind of open that box up, a lot of them feel very uncomfortable because they haven't been allowed to do that in so long. But usually I think it's a natural thing to have that creativity, and once you have someone who's asking you to do it and pushing you to do it. And so I don't think it takes that long to get them out of it, but it's a battle to like, no, you do have interesting things going on in your life. And then you start asking them different things, and then all of a sudden they'll tell you stuff that you wish other people were in the room to hear, because it's like, that's so important and so interesting. And they still look at you, even though you're just like jumping up and down for them. Like, how is that interesting? Like, and so I think it's a process of doing that too. And getting used to that is important. So I agree completely when the idea of conferences is like, why would anybody want to listen to what I have to say? And I think if you realize you're doing something in your classroom that's effective and your students are getting something out of it, then it's almost like your obligation to go share those things so that other students can benefit in, other states or other counties with what you're doing.
And I think that's why Great Valley is so, awesome, because it's a very almost casual environment to be like, hey, I'm doing this thing, and other people in the room are like, oh my gosh, tell me more about it. And you're like, oh, I have an idea that's worth sharing and people want to hear about it. So building those connections, whether it's a book study or just sharing or, teacher groups or whatever, but having that small interaction with people outside of your little island makes it, you realize that people want to hear what you have to say. But going to the student part, I've had students literally say, just tell me what you want me to say and I'll say it.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I don't have these answers to tell you.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I want to know what you think. And I've heard, never ask students a question you already know the answer to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's important because they need to know that you're not asking them a question because you want to know if they, obviously there are some questions that have a right or wrong answer,
right.
but like, no, I care about what you think. Like, I don't have there is no right answer. Like, what you can think whatever you want. Like, let's talk about this. And so I think getting students to that place where they know that people actually care about what they have to say, not about what the textbook has to say, mm-hmm. is a huge shift that people struggle with in general.
Going off what you said, there's one of my favorite essays a student wrote a couple of semesters ago was about a teacher profile, a teacher at a junior college that she went to, and how she was struggling with her assignments. And then I think I mentioned this in the last one, but she was struggling with her assignments, and then she realized like the political leanings and the opinions that the professor had. So then she started writing all of her papers towards that, and she started getting A's in all of her assignments. And I like the way she did it because she's very funny. And in one sense, I was saddened by it, but the other sense, I was proud of her because that's learning how to learn. Like, she did it. She's learning, this is what it takes. But at the same time, you also want to make sure that you help students get out of that sense of just saying whatever the teacher wants. But you need teachers who are open to hearing that and want to and encourage the student to share their opinions and their voice with what's going on.
Yeah, I remember when I was an undergrad, I had a professor, Matt Brown, and up until that point, I was, I think, a junior. It had always been read this book and write on this prompt, read this play and write on this prompt, and it was always very directed. And then he was like, here's your book. When you're done, write an essay of this length. And I went to his office hours. I was like, I don't know what do you want me to write about? He was like, write an essay. And I was like, but about what? It was so foreign to me that, and he was just like, about the book. And I'm like, but what do you want me to write about? And he looked at me and he's like, you want to be a teacher, right? And I was like, yeah. And he says, how do you expect to teach students how to do something you can't figure out how to do yourself? And I just looked at, and this is like, I was working 3 jobs and taking 20 students, and I burst into tears. And he's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, no, you're right. I need to figure it out. And I just turned and walked away. But it was like that moment where I was like, oh, he just wants to know what I think. Like, it wasn't, write about this particular thing or this particular thing. It was just, what do you want to write about? Write about it. Yeah. And that was such a huge turning point. And I think I wrote about it our summer I wrote the day Matt Brown made me cry. Was the title of that piece. But it was such a big turning point where it's like, oh, people want to hear what I have to say. That's huge. And getting students to a point where, or people in general to a point where they realize everybody has their story, everybody has their voice, everybody has their experiences. Nobody else, identical twins who've gone through school in the exact same classes aren't going to have the same experiences. So just knowing that we all have our own things to say that make us, I don't want to say important, but we are all important, and realizing that we are important and we have things to say. And maybe that's why people know my voice or who I am, is because I think I have a lot of important things to say that other people need to hear, but I think other people need to hear that. We all have important things to say. It's just a matter of giving yourself the platform to say it.
Yeah, and I'll add, so a couple of things just on that, but I want to go back a little bit, but on what you just said, I'll add, because I think it's important for especially younger students to hear, because I think because of the time that we're in, it feels like everybody's welcomed and everybody's appreciated and everything you have to say is important. And I agree with that. I think we should be doing that. At the same time, being a professional educator, you have to, and I know you know this, I just want to make sure it's clear to everybody listening, you do have stuff that's important to say, but just because you have an opinion doesn't mean that you have something important to say. when we go to conferences, or when you go to a conference, Maddie doesn't go to a conference and say, I was just thinking about this, so I'm going to talk to you about it for an hour and a half. Like the conference that you and I talked at was based off Zaretta Hammond's text, and there's a lot of work that you and I did looking at how does this connect and the research. So yeah, it's stuff that we're doing that we find valuable, but it's also research and evidence-based and thought about, not just, how come you're not listening to me? This is what I think. So I think that's an important distinction to make. The other thing I was going to say was, for future teachers who are assigning these assignments, it's so much better and so much more interesting to read when you allow students that freedom to write about what they've noticed or what they valued or what they thought about things, rather than having them write about the same essay, like an abortion essay or a politics essay, and then you get the same essay from every single student who says this, and you have to read 25 of those or 125 of those. But when I've been blown away on so many occasions I can't remember, but reading something where it's like, I presented on Zaretta Hammond, I presented on this text, I'm pretty familiar with this, and then the student will write something and it's like, holy crap, like I didn't even think about, like that's an amazing take on this. And then there's this really cool discussion that starts taking place between the professor and the student that isn't about professor and student anymore. It's just about two intellectuals talking about something. And that's a really, really cool spot to be. But I don't think you can get there with students if you're just assigning the same, tell me 2 reasons why you agree or disagree with abortion, back it up with evidence from this text. Like so I think that's important for teachers to think about when they're assigning things. Like if you're complaining about your students writing boring things, then that's probably because you're assigning boring topics.
Well, and I think, and I'm not trying to say negative things about particular curriculum, but I think that I'm trying to say this without being sued by curriculum companies. I think that there's this push to get all students in the same line, because they're thinking of it from, well, if we all read the same article, we can talk about it, and then if we all have the same prompt, like it'll help narrow things down, and we can create resources. And if we all get students in the same line of writing, and their voice will come through in what they choose to say. But it's like, if we all have the same 4 texts, we all have the same prompt, there's not really that many different things you can say about those 4 texts and that prompt. And when I was actually looking for something else completely different on my drive the other day, I found all these old projects that I used to do in Palo Alto with choice, and I had forgotten so much about them. And it was like, oh my gosh, students used to have so much more freedom to say what they wanted to say and pick the vehicle of what direction they wanted to say it. And I remember one year the student was like, I know that you said we have to do this, but can I please do a soundtrack instead, because I'm really interested in music and I'd like to write some songs. And I was like, go for it, like right. That sounds great. And he wrote in his final portfolio like how important that was to him, because he had heard no so many times, and finally somebody allowed him to do something. And then seeing those old projects and being like, I've kind of not given my students any of that. So actually for our final project for distance learning, I'm pulling back some of the like giving them those options again, because I'm like, if they're going to do this at home right now and they have so much other things going on, the least I can do is give them some freedom and fun and options, and let them know that it's like, I want to hear what they have to say. And I think that's also part of what I'm going to take back from this, is that choice and that voice. And, I still have to maintain within the integrity of my curriculum, but how can I do that while not stifling students' individuality or voice, and making sure they know that they have important things to say.
Like, that also ties into, I know people worry about plagiarism quite a bit, and I think about, and I'm not saying I've never had students plagiarize because of the assignments, but I think you lessen the chance for students to plagiarize when you're creating interesting assignments, because if you have an assignment that's original, then they can search all they want, but they're not going to be able to find something that's going to fit what's going on. So whenever I hear people talk about like, oh, 7 students plagiarized or whatever, usually the first thing I ask, look into like your assignment, like what are you asking them to do? Are you asking them to write an argumentative essay on, I keep going back to abortion, argumentative essay about abortion? And then it's like, yeah, let's type that into Google and see how many different essays are available for that. And so being creative in your assignments also helps kind of alleviate other things that you don't even think about. 2 last things, because I know we talked about try to do 30 minutes and we're already over an hour.
We have a lot of things to say. We're important.
So the second thing is the kind of how to end it, just kind of thinking about the audience in my mind for these are emerging educators. So what advice would you have for an emerging educator? But I'm just going to tease that and then think about that while I'm asking this other question. But could you walk us through your academic kind of timeline? So did your K-12, went to, sounds like Chico, but can you walk us through like how you became teacher at K-12?
Like just academic, like that.
Yeah, what steps did you take in order to get to where you are? 'Cause I think a lot of times students don't, and I'm in the same boat with my EDD. Like I feel bad for my chair because I ask a lot of questions, and it's because I haven't done this before. So I don't know like what the timeline is or when this should be turned in or the process. And so I think sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And I think students sometimes will get anxiety because they're not sure what the steps are to get to the end goal of where they want to be. So whenever I have someone like you on, I think it's important to kind of share that so that they know, oh, this is how she went about it. And this is kind of a general way of going about it.
Okay, so hopefully I'm interpreting this question right, but I'm gonna take it way back. I'll go a little bit of kindergarten. We're gonna talk time. I know, but I don't know. Like it's not like I had a moment where I was like this made me want to be a teacher. Like I literally have always wanted to be a teacher. So even in elementary school, in sixth grade, I put together like a sixth grade kinder mentor program. So like you could partner up and we would do things. And I'm like, I was a sixth grader thinking like, how can we make relationships with the kinder down the block? And so kind of going through my education, like I always wanted to be the tutor or help with this. And I didn't know what subject I wanted to teach. And in junior high, I got the English award in 7th and 8th grade. And then when I went to high school, I was like, okay, maybe I'm kind of good at this English thing. Like maybe I'll kind of go that direction. And my brother at that time wanted to be a history teacher, and he's way smarter in history than I'll ever even pretend to be. So I was like, okay, he can take history, I'll take English. And so when I was choosing a college, and all the future educators, I've already picked their college, so this might be a moot point, but I wasn't looking at, the UCs who were research schools or the, super high level Ivy, because I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted a school that was going to help me be a better teacher. Mm-hmm. And so I applied to, Sac State and Sonoma and Chico. So I went to Chico, amazing professors there, wonderful program there. Got to focus on language and linguistics. My degree is actually in English education, which was super powerful because it wasn't just, I'm getting a degree in English and I'm going to be a teacher. It was, my degree is how do I teach English to other people. I did go to Sac State for one semester, immediately went right back to Chico. It was not what I wanted at all. It was a commuter school. I was living at home again. Wasn't for me. And then I just stayed at Chico for my credential program. And then came out with my single subject teaching credential. I don't have my master's. We've talked about this tons of times that I want to go back. It's been 10 years now. Cost is a big factor in it, whereas I don't really know what direction I want to go. Personally, I want to do creative writing because poetry is my number one, super passion, but I don't know if that's really a smart use of my money, or if I should do something that's going to be a little more classroom driven. So I'm kind of stuck on that path. Do I do something that's really going to help me more in the classroom, or something that now I'm kind of doing selfishly? Mm-hmm. But I do want to teach at the post-secondary level someday. So I know I want to get my master's in something English related, but I'm not going to put that money and that time into it until I really know what I want to do. And I know that it's not admin. So that I do know. I do not want to be in administration.
I don't want to go too far down this road, but have you heard of Sierra Nevada?
Brewery?
No.
Oh, I was like.
There's I think it's Sierra Nevada, and Patterson would know more, but they have, cause when I was thinking about it too, like master's or doctorate or whatever, they have a master's in creative writing program, and I think you can do most of it online, but then you go once every 2 weeks in person or something like that. I'll find it somewhere, but I think Patterson's the one that introduced me to it. And then she had former students and my former classmates that went through it. But what's nice about that is a master's in creative writing, I believe, if I remember this correctly, is a terminal degree, because I don't think they have doctorates in creative writing. So if you have a terminal degree in it and your master's, then you can't go any further with it. And then that would get you into post-secondary. That's what Sam Pierstorff, who's like my favorite teacher over at MJC, he has his master's in creative writing, and it's MFA, Master's in Fine Arts, I think, is creative writing with the emphasis. So I think that's a good idea. Anyways, last thing then, what advice, let's pretend that you actually are in Libs 1000 with the 75 students all staring at you, and they're all going to be future educators, and they're looking at you to tell them, to guide them. What's the one piece of advice that you think is the most important thing for them to be successful as educators?
I wish you would have given me this question ahead of time. I would have stressed about it for the last week. I mean, honestly, like we were talking about, like, just, I think have fun, which sounds so silly, but like, don't take yourself so seriously that you burn out and you forget why you got into the profession, because you do have such optimism when you start. And I still have a student teacher, but we don't have class right now. But I saw so much of myself in her, where it was like at the beginning, you have this like utopia idea of school, and then when things start to not really go the way you think they're going to go, because it's life and human beings don't act the way you think they should act all the time, you start to doubt yourself, and you start to wonder if, you know, this is really what I should be doing. Am I doing a good job? Am I helping students? And I think that, remember, like, making those human connections with them is going to make the curriculum side of it, when those things start to go kind of sideways, I don't know if I feel like I'm not ending up, I should have mic dropped before, you should have just cut the video off there. But I think that, like, the most important connection I'm having with students right now are when we talk to each other as people. Right now, we're all in the pandemic. We're not, you know, student, teacher, we're all like surviving. We're all just human beings trying to survive right now. And I think that, just remember that we're all just human beings, and students are people, and your curriculum's important. None of us got into education because we hate our subject matter, but you can't take it so seriously that you don't find joy in what you do anymore, because I've seen so much negativity surrounding teaching lately, and people are like, my advice for future teachers is run. And like, that's just so negative to me, because I went back into teaching when so many people were like, get out of teaching, don't be a teacher. And I'm like, I had a, 8:30 to 2:30. I didn't take any work home with me. And I was like, this is not bucket filling. I want to go back to the classroom. I want to go back to the students. And I want to pull my hair out sometimes. They drive me absolutely batty sometimes. Like, I'm like, why did I come back to this? But then when you get those moments where you're like, this is why I came back to this, like, this is so important. And students need people who are going to find joy in coming in the classroom every day and smiling at their students every day, and genuine happiness of seeing those students. So I think that's my big advice, is remember your why, of why, like, what you're feeling right now. Remember that when things get hard and when things get tough, and when you're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be, it's better. It's not going to be what you think it's going to be. It's going to be so much better than you could even imagine teaching is going to be. So you kind of get that moment where you're like, this is sideways, this is not what I thought teaching was. But if you push through that, you'll find that what teaching actually is so much more than you even could begin to predict it is.
I think that's wonderful. And there's two things I just wanted to agree with and connect with. Is one of them is what you said about, like, in this pandemic, we're human beings trying to survive. I think understanding that perspective when the pandemic's over as well has been something really valuable for me. I think a lot of times professors forget the student perspective, even though they were once a student, and educators in general just kind of forget that student perspective. And I think if you can remember and hang on to what it feels like right now to be a student, and then be that teacher that's a quote somewhere, be that teacher that you wish you had right now, has paid off huge for me, as far as like trying my best to understand that the student is a human being trying to survive just like I am, and is trying to be successful just like I am. How can I, now that I'm in a place of authority, how could I share that authority and power with them so that they can be successful and I can support them? The other thing, I can't tell you how many different times I've either been in the classroom, left the classroom, and called someone, like a family member and told them about something that took place during my day as a teacher, where I just like break down in tears, or just because I'm so happy, but I'm emotional about like what I do for a living and the fact that I get to do this every single day and get paid to do it. And I think, just to agree with what you were saying, I think if you can keep yourself there and not get wrapped up in all the other BS, which is really difficult to do because you're going to have a lot of BS, but if you can keep yourself there where your goal is the human lives in front of you, you're going to have a really fun rest of your life teaching. Okay, so any final podcast words before I press stop?
No, I just wanted, I mean, I admittedly was a little stressed out. I'm type A. I like to plan everything out, and I deliberately didn't plan I have no notes or anything in front of me because I'm like, I just wanted it to be authentic. So I thank you for inviting me to be here and to talk. And, I like to talk and say things. And, I mean, I can talk about education all day and all night, and that's part of my problem. But yeah, this was fun. So thank you. I think my final words to future teachers are just like, hang in there, especially now when things are so uncertain. Nobody really knows what's coming in the fall. I mean, hopefully it goes back to normal, but we don't really know. So just kind of hang in there, and we're all in this together. And one thing I want to share real quick, I think being a human with your students is really important. I have been remind messaging students just to check in, and one student was like, how are you doing, and asked me, and I'm like, honestly, like, today was a really bad day, but I have to remember, like, this is a new normal, and when things get tough, you can't, like, you gotta pull yourself out of it because we have a long road ahead of us. And her response was something along the lines of, yeah, like, I'm sorry it was hard, but we're all in this together, and our goal is to keep each other safe. And she's like, I learned that from you, that when, like, it's okay to have those emotions, but you have to lean on each other and depend on each other. And like, that's more important. Like, you could write a beautiful essay, and that text right there was way more important than that essay, because it was real life lessons and being a real person with a student and kind of just being human with them, was something that was just so powerful to me. And when, things inevitably, I'm going to want to pull my hair out come like October, November next year. When, 5 classes of freshmen are making me crazy, especially when they haven't been in school in 5.5 months. I'm really looking forward to that. But remembering those moments of joy. And this is another piece of advice. I just have to say, have a folder that you keep all of your happy stuff, all the good notes from students, all the thank you notes, all the emails, and keep it in there, because there will be a time where you're going to want to pull out that and like see all the happy, because it's not all happy, and you need to like have a little happy folder. So that's a practical piece of advice for future teachers, is have a happy folder.
And I agree with you, because you've been in my office where I have my cork board, and that's exactly why I do that. So that some people come, like people that work there will come in and like, oh my God. And to me though, it's like, I need that overwhelming happiness there. So I know that that's always you're talking about the why. That's always my why, is like looking through just looking to the right or whatever and seeing those pictures and seeing the cards. And that's exactly why we do what we do. And it reminds me too, you shared you don't need to share everything, but you just shared recently with Great Valley, for your birthday, you had a student reach out to you. And it's like, those are the things, right? Those are the things that it's nice to get a paycheck, but I would argue that what you received from the text and from that student for your birthday are more valuable.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to press stop, but hang out because I still want to talk to you. So